Part 1. The Wallet on 8th Street. It was a cold Thursday in late March when I found the wallet. Not the kind of cold that makes your breath fog dramatically in the air. No, this was the kind of bone-deep chill that somehow sneaks past your jacket, your hoodie, your soul. The sky was the color of week-old dishwater, and my mood matched it perfectly. I had just gotten off work at the hardware store. 8-hour shift, 2 customers yelled at me, and my boss gave me the classic, "We're like a family here" speech right before asking me to cover for Jerry on Sunday. Again, I declined. Again, he didn't love that. Anyway, I was walking home down 8th Street, the cracked sidewalk doing its usual job of tripping me every 5th step, when I saw it. Just lying there. A leather wallet. Not new, but not old. Worn in, like it had stories. Like it had seen things. I bent down and picked it up without thinking, glancing around like I'd just snatched a $100 bill. But no one was around. Just the wind, a plastic bag tumbling down the curb like it had somewhere to be, and me. I opened it. No cash, which honestly made it feel more genuine. There was a driver's license, a couple of old receipts, a beat-up library card, and a small black and white photo tucked into a clear sleeve. The license said, Raymond Ray Kessler. Age, 67. Address, about 4 blocks from where I stood. The photo caught me off guard. It was 2 men in army uniforms, mid-laugh, looking like they were in the middle of telling a joke only they found funny. One of them looked familiar. I squinted, rubbed my thumb over the plastic, and froze. It was my dad, or someone who looked exactly like my dad, just younger, much younger. I hadn't seen that version of him since I was a kid, in old photo albums that smelled like cardboard and attic dust. I never knew him to have served in the military. He never talked about it. Hell, he barely talked at all. The man next to him, presumably Ray Kessler, had a wide grin and big, clunky glasses, like someone who played harmonica at barbecues and laughed at his own jokes. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, processing it. Why would this stranger, someone who lived nearby, have a photo of my dad? I checked my phone. 6:42 p.m. I should have just dropped it off at the nearest lost and found, maybe a police station. But something gnawed at me. That photo. My dad's silence. The address. So I started walking. Raymond Kessler's building was one of those older brownstones that had clearly been repainted more times than it had been cleaned. The buzzer didn't work. I knocked. No answer. I waited, heart thumping. I felt stupid, like I was trespassing on someone else's memories. Just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open. A man, maybe late 60s, balding but solid, looked out at me through the chain lock. Yeah. Hi. Sorry to bother you. I found this wallet nearby. I held it up. It has your name. I figured you might want it back. He stared for a long moment, then unlatched the door. He took the wallet slowly, turning it in his hands like he wasn't sure it was real. Thanks. Thought I dropped it at the diner. I nodded awkwardly. No problem. Then he flipped it open, saw the photo, and stopped. His eyes didn't just soften, they shifted, deepened, like he'd fallen through some internal trapdoor into a memory. You know the guy on the left? I asked cautiously. He looked up. That's your father, isn't it? I blinked. How did you? You've got his eyes. And his posture. Slightly hunched like you're expecting disappointment. He always stood like that too. I didn't know whether to be insulted or deeply intrigued. Come in, he said finally. His apartment smelled like pipe tobacco and books. There were stacks of old National Geographics, a bonsai tree that looked older than me, and a wall filled with photographs, most of them black and white, some faded to sepia. I noticed one with my dad again, and again, and again. He never told you about me? Ray asked, sitting down slowly on a faded recliner. His cat, an orange tabby, hopped into his lap like it had been waiting all day. No, I said honestly. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack. We weren't close. Ray nodded slowly. He was like that, closed off, even when we were young. I sat across from him, trying not to stare too hard. We met in basic training, he continued. Vietnam era. We were the only ones in our unit who could play chess, so we played. A lot. Lost some of those games on purpose just to make him feel good. He smiled to himself. He never knew. He paused, eyes glinting. We were best friends. For years. And then we weren't. I swallowed. Why? Ray didn't answer at first. He stroked the cat. He left. Vanished. Didn't say goodbye. I wrote letters. Never heard back. It hurt more than I expected. I didn't know what to say. I was still grappling with the fact that this man had known my dad, truly known him, in ways I never had. He was a complicated guy, Ray added. But he was loyal. To a fault. If he left, it wasn't for no reason. I nodded slowly. He never talked about the war. Never mentioned you. I believe it, Ray said. But he saved my life once. I looked up sharply. What? Ambush. Cambodia. He pulled me out. Took a hit for it too. Never complained. Just smoked a cigarette after and said, I'd do it again. I suddenly felt like I was talking to someone who held a missing chapter of my life. Of my dad's life. I didn't know what made me say it, but the words tumbled out anyway. Would you tell me more? Ray smiled sadly. Sure. But only if you help me put together this damn bookshelf I ordered online. It's been sitting in the box for 2 weeks. And just like that, I found myself spending the evening with a man who knew my father better than I ever had. All because of a lost wallet. Part 2. The photo in the wallet. The wallet was worn, creased, and soft in the way leather only gets after being handled for decades. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe curiosity, maybe boredom, maybe something deeper. But I did. And the first thing I saw wasn't cash or cards. It was a photo. A small, faded Polaroid, curled at the edges. 2 guys leaning against a classic Mustang. One of them unmistakably my dad. Younger, leaner, hair longer, sunglasses too big for his face. He looked happy. Genuinely, carelessly happy. The guy next to him? I didn't recognize. He was smiling too, arms slung around my dad's shoulder like they'd just pulled off the heist of the century. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, Summer 85, still the dumbest idea we ever had. Worth it. My stomach twisted in a way I didn't understand. I had never seen my dad with that look on his face. Never seen that car. Never heard him mention this guy. It was like peeking into a secret life I didn't know existed. I kept going. No ID, no license. Just a few crumpled receipts, an old train ticket from Chicago to Detroit, and a wrinkled bar napkin with a number written in pencil. Ask for Annie. She still remembers. I laughed out loud, partly from the absurdity, partly from discomfort. Who even writes on napkins anymore? I sat there in my apartment, holding the mystery in my hands. The wallet had slipped from the coat I picked up from a thrift store 2 days ago. I thought it was just a cool vintage jacket. Turns out, it was a time capsule. But here's the thing. The handwriting on the back of that photo? I recognized it. It was the same looping, half-cursive scrawl my dad used on the sticky notes he left for me as a kid. It was his writing. And that scared me more than anything. The next day, I called my dad. We don't talk often. He's always been reserved. Not cold, just emotionally weatherproof. Like one of those buildings that looks the same no matter the season. Hey, I said, voice shaking more than I liked. Hey kid, everything all right? Yeah. Just weird question. Did you ever have a friend named? I paused. The photo didn't say a name. Named what? Never mind. Dumb. I chickened out. There was a pause. Then he said something unexpected. You found something, didn't you? I froze. What? That jacket. The leather one. It was his. Whose? A long exhale through the phone. Then silence. Heavy, awkward, painful silence. Is it all right if I come over? He said, finally. He showed up 2 hours later. No small talk, no weather chat. Just walked in and said, show me. I handed him the wallet. His face felt like a curtain dropping on a stage. He held it like it was radioactive, like it hurt to touch. His name was Mason, he said quietly. We met in '84. He was my best friend. The way he said it was, I knew where this was going. We worked construction one summer in Ohio. Broke as hell. Lived on diner food and bad ideas. One day we stole our boss's car, just to joyride, not really steal it, and ended up in Nashville by accident. I blinked. How do you end up in Nashville by accident? He smiled. We weren't bright. But man, we were alive. Free in a way I don't think I've ever been since. He sat down, eyes never leaving the photo. We made a pact to always stay in touch. We even buried a box together. Stuff from that summer. Photos, letters, some dumb cassette with us singing Springsteen off-key. We called it the Capsule of Glory. I laughed, surprised at the name. He left for Europe that fall. I stayed. I met your mom, got a job, built a life. We wrote for a while. Then less. Then not at all. I thought he'd forgotten. Maybe I had too. He turned the wallet over in his hands. How did you find this? He asked. I explained the thrift store, the coat, the accidental discovery. He was quiet the whole time, nodding, eyes scanning the past in his mind like old film reels. Then he said, "He must have come back. Maybe looking for me. Maybe just retracing steps. Why wouldn't he have found you?" He shrugged. "Life's complicated. Pride gets in the way. Fear. Regret." There was a pause. Then he added, "Or maybe I wasn't ready to be found." I didn't know what to say. There was something so human in that moment, seeing your dad not as a dad, but as a man with chapters he never read out loud, with friendships that carved him, with grief he packed away and pretended wasn't there. He stood up, handed me the wallet. "You keep it," he said. "Mason would have liked you." And just like that, he left. That night, I sat with the wallet on my desk, staring at it like it might blink. I flipped the photo over again. Still the dumbest idea we ever had. Worth it. And in a weird, indescribable way, I felt like I was inheriting not just a story, but a connection. To a man I never met. To the version of my dad I never knew. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew I had to find that buried box. Part 3. The Cabin in the Pines. I had no idea what I expected to find when I parked in front of that old cabin. Honestly, I half thought it would be burned to the ground, or that someone would have turned it into an Airbnb with string lights and a hot tub. But there it was, still tucked into the trees like it had been waiting. Waiting for someone. Maybe for me. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. I stood still for a moment before unlocking the gate. The hinges let out a low groan like they hadn't moved in years. The pathway was littered with pine needles and overgrowth. I stepped over roots, each one somehow familiar though I'd never been here before. Except maybe I had. That odd feeling of déjà vu clung to me like humidity. Something in my bones knew this place. The door opened easier than it should have. No key, just a stubborn turn of the knob. Inside, the air was musty but not rotten. Like time had paused. Dust coated everything, but the structure was solid. Wooden beams, stone fireplace, faded checkered curtains. And photos. There were still photos on the walls. Faded, yellowed, but unmistakable. One of them was of my dad. Younger. Shirtless and grinning. Holding a fish almost as big as his torso. Another with a group of guys sitting around a campfire, laughing. Beer bottles in hand. One of them looked a lot like the man whose wallet I'd found. I stood there, staring at my father's younger self, trying to reconcile him with the quiet, stoic man I'd grown up with. This version of him was alive. Wild even. I searched the place slowly, almost reverently. A drawer near the fireplace had old postcards, some written in my dad's unmistakable blocky handwriting. Many were addressed to someone named Mick. The name matched the license I'd found in the wallet. Mick Gallagher. So they were friends. There were receipts, ticket stubs from concerts in the 80s, even a half-melted cassette labeled Road Trip 92. A faded notebook sat at the bottom of the drawer. I opened it and immediately saw my dad's name scribbled on the inside cover alongside Mick's. A list of goals filled the first page. Build the boat. Take the trip to Oregon. Write the book. Never forget the summer of '89. The words hit me like a gut punch. I sat on the old plaid couch, trying to breathe through the emotions swelling in my chest. This wasn't just some cabin. This was their place. A shrine to a friendship I never knew existed. Why hadn't Dad told me about Mick? Why had this place been forgotten, left to dissolve into dirt and pine needles? I spent hours there, opening drawers, flipping through time like pages of a book I wasn't meant to read. Every little item told a story, but no story explained why it ended. Eventually, I stepped outside to call my dad. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, bud. Everything all right?" There was a pause before I said anything. "Dad, who's Mick?" Silence. Then a slow, quiet inhale. "You found the wallet, didn't you?" I blinked. "What?" "I thought it might find you eventually," he said, his voice distant, like he was watching a memory unravel in real time. "I left it there the last time I visited the cabin. Years ago." I felt cold despite the heat of the sun. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" He exhaled long and low. "Because I didn't know how to. Some friendships, they burn bright and then disappear. And sometimes, losing a friend feels worse than losing family." I didn't know what to say. He'd never talked like this before. "I wanted to," he added. "Tell you, I mean, about that part of my life. But every time I tried, it felt too raw, too far gone." "You still have the key?" I asked. "I don't need one," he replied. "The door never locked." Of course it didn't. After we hung up, I just sat on the porch steps of that cabin, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. I imagined them, my dad and Mick, two young guys chasing big dreams, building boats and writing half-finished books, laughing around a fire like the world would never change. And now, decades later, I was here, sitting in their shadow, in their silence. That night, I stayed at a motel nearby. I couldn't sleep. My brain was buzzing, alive with questions and fragments of old stories. I felt like a puzzle piece in someone else's memory box. The next morning, I returned to the cabin and did something I didn't fully understand at the time. I cleaned it, swept the floors, dusted the mantel, rearranged the photos. I didn't know if I'd ever come back, but something about the act felt necessary, like tending to a grave or lighting a candle. When I left, I locked the gate behind me, not because I wanted to keep people out, but because I wanted to honor what was inside. That night, back home, I couldn't stop thinking about what my dad said. Some friendships burn brighter than family. And suddenly, the wallet in my drawer wasn't just a lost item. It was a map, a trailhead to something I never knew I needed to find. Part 4. The note inside the photograph. I don't know why I hadn't noticed it before. The old photo of my dad and the mysterious man with the bomber jacket and crooked smile. Something felt different now. I'd stared at it dozens of times over the last few days, but tonight, something tugged at me. Maybe it was the weight of everything finally settling. Maybe it was the way the edges curled like it had been handled hundreds of times. Or maybe I was finally ready to see. I tilted the photo under the desk lamp's glow, and that's when I saw it. A seam. The photo wasn't just a photo. It had been folded in half. Carefully, deliberately, and taped shut along the back, like it was hiding something. My heart did that thing where it feels like it skips rope with your ribs. I peeled back the tape, hands shaking more than I care to admit. Inside was a smaller note, tucked in like a secret waiting years to be heard. Faded ink, rushed handwriting, barely legible. Charlie, if anything happens, tell Mikey I'm sorry. He'll understand one day. I always looked out for him. I always will. Jay. Charlie was my dad's name. Mikey, that's me. I sat there, unmoving, for what felt like an hour. The buzzing of the lamp, the distant hum of traffic outside, the creak of my apartment settling, all of it faded. All I could hear was that single line. He'll understand one day. Jay, that had to be Jack. The name on the military tag. The guy in the photo. The guy whose wallet I found. The guy who what, vanished? Or died? I didn't even know what I was chasing anymore. Truth? Closure? Connection? All I knew was that this wasn't just some random man from my dad's past. This was someone who had once promised to protect me. Someone my dad had buried so deep, it took a coincidence and a lost wallet to bring him back to the surface. I called my dad again. It was nearly midnight. He answered on the second ring. You okay? He asked. No hello. Just that same low voice, like he'd been expecting my call. I found a note, I said. Inside the photo. Silence. Then what did it say? I read it aloud. Word for word. My voice cracked a little at the end, but I didn't care. There was a pause that stretched like a canyon. Finally, he sighed. You weren't supposed to see that. Then why leave it? I asked. Why fold it up and hide it in a picture? Why keep the picture at all? Another long pause. Because I couldn't throw him away, he said. And I couldn't look at him, either. I waited. He saved my life once. Twice, probably. But it wasn't just about the war, Mikey. He was more than a friend. He was like a brother. We made promises. Some of them we kept. Some we couldn't. My throat felt tight. What happened? Things changed after the war. People changed. Jack, he had demons. We both did. But his were louder. There was pain in his voice I'd never heard before. Not even when Mom died. Not even when Grandpa passed. He left one day. Just left. No word. No note. I thought he was dead. I grieved him like he was. I let that sit. I'm sorry, I said. He chuckled, bitterly. You're sorry? Hell, kid. I never told you about him because I thought I'd made peace with it. But I never did. I looked at the photo again. Jack's arms slung over my dad's shoulder like they'd just won something huge. Their grins too big. Too real. Dad, I said quietly. He didn't forget you. There was another pause. Then I heard him sniff. I don't even remember what he looked like toward the end, he whispered. I wanted to tell him everything. The dog tag. The wallet. The address scribbled inside. The fact that the world had twisted just enough to put that man's memory back into our lives through me. But I didn't. Not yet. Not until I figured out what it all meant. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jack, a man I'd never met, a man who somehow felt important, like a ghost who wasn't there to haunt, but to remind. I dreamed of a kid named Ben from Tokyo. I dreamed of Jack playing trumpet with my dad in some smoky bar, laughing, tossing beer caps into an old helmet. I dreamed of my dad smiling in a way I hadn't seen since I was a boy. And when I woke up, I knew what I had to do. I was going to that address, even if it led nowhere. Even if it was just an old mailbox and overgrown grass. Even if it hurt. Because some promises don't die with the people who made them. Some promises echo until someone finally listens. And maybe, just maybe, I was the one meant to hear it. Part 5. The last page of the journal. I didn't sleep that night. The journal, my dad's journal, sat open on my kitchen table like a ghost whispering in ink. I kept rereading the same page over and over, trying to absorb every word, every space between the lines. He'd written about Theo, about nights in Saigon, running through the rain and laughing like they were immortal, about bar fights in jazz clubs, and a dream to open a little place on the coast and serve whiskey until their hands were too old to pour it. But most of all, he'd written about regret. I loved him. My dad had scrawled in messy cursive, like he'd been fighting the pen. I loved him like I was drowning and he was air. But I never told him. I never could. I sat there, alone, feeling like I was intruding on something sacred. This wasn't the version of my dad I'd known. The silent, steady man who fixed things without complaint, who sat with a beer and a blank stare every Sunday night like he was watching a movie only he could see. This was a man who had lived and loved and lost in a way I couldn't have imagined. And Theo? Theo had written letters back, ones that had never been sent. They were folded neatly inside the journal like pressed flowers. Some were short, just a sentence or two. Miss you. Hope you still play. I wore your damn ring again today. Others were longer, full of frustration and hope, and that same ache of love left unspoken. I couldn't take it. I had to do something. The next morning, I walked into the cafe where Theo worked. He was wiping down the counter, humming to himself. His hair was even grayer in the daylight. The light caught on a small gold ring he wore around his neck. Morning, he said, before looking up. Then he paused. You okay? I pulled the journal from my backpack and placed it gently on the counter between us. He looked at it like it was radioactive. Slowly, his hands reached out, trembling. I think this belongs to you, I said. Theo didn't speak. He opened the journal and flipped through the pages like someone searching for a heartbeat. When he reached the back, he stopped. His eyes welled up. He kept it, Theo whispered. After all this time. I nodded, unsure what to say. But he didn't need me to talk. He pulled up a chair, and we sat there in silence. Just two strangers, tied together by someone who had been too scared to say what mattered. Eventually, Theo looked up. You know, he could have been so much happier. I think about that a lot. Me too, I admitted. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. But he was a stubborn bastard. Always more afraid of being known than being alone. The next hour felt like a funeral and a birth all in one. Theo told me stories my dad had never shared. About their last day together. How they'd argued over something stupid, and my dad had walked away, promising to write. How he never did. He told me about a song they wrote together. How he'd never played it since. Play it for me, I asked. If you still remember it. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he got up, went to the back, and returned with a dusty trumpet case. Only if you promise not to record it, he joked. This one's just for ghosts. And then he played. It was a quiet, haunting tune, full of longing. Half lullaby, half goodbye. And in that moment, I saw my father, not the man I'd known, but the boy he'd once been, sitting on a rooftop in Vietnam with a cigarette between his fingers and Theo at his side. I didn't cry until the last note. A week later, I stood at my dad's grave with Theo beside me. We didn't say much. I placed a copy of the journal beneath the flowers. I figured if there's anything after this, maybe he's reading it now. Maybe he's finally brave enough to whisper what he never could in life. Theo put the trumpet down beside the headstone. For you, Johnny, he said. Play it loud, wherever you are. I never expected to find love stories in a wallet. But I did. And now I carry it all with me. Not just the old leather wallet, still tucked in my drawer, but the truth, the music, the weight of a man who taught me more in death than he ever did alive. And when I walk past that cafe and hear Theo humming a tune no one else knows, I smile. Because love, even hidden, still echoes. And some echoes never fade.